My name is Dan Komsky, and this is episode number 1. Today, we're super excited because we have Andy Vasily joining us today. And he is an all-star podcaster himself. He's got over 200 episodes, old friend of mine. Looking forward to seeing him. So we are just waiting for him to join in. Before he does, I just want to talk about the podcast and kind of where we're going with it and what we're doing. So this podcast is based on living all-star living. And what we're trying to do is we are trying to develop a pathway for people to have that successful all-star life. And now I'm not pretending that I have all the answers, but what I am saying is that I can interview the people that do. One of those people is Andy Vasily. He's just joining us right now. Welcome, Andy. So good to see you, buddy.
This is a new platform for me. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. You doing all right?
Okay, so this is the new platform for me. So I'm very interested in this platform for my own podcasting. So yeah, no, it's great to be here, Dan. Thank you very much.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. Like I said, you're one of the big inspirations for me in terms of getting this thing started. We talked this, it must have been this past summer, and we got together and we had some conversations, and I just really, really respect what you're doing, Andy. You know, you're going out there and you've got 215, 200. What episode are you on now? 216? I think you're 214.
Around 217, but prior to that, I had tinkered around in podcasting, and I probably had 20 or 30 episodes before that. So yeah, well over 200, and I'm still learning.
That's a lot of experience, man. That's a lot of things. Here I am on podcast number 1. Let's just see if I can try to keep up a little bit. I'll be picking your brain for sure in the years to come, I think.
Well, I appreciate you and I connecting for this purpose. So
yeah, me too. I think there's some meaningful work to be done, and so when I started developing the context or all of the information for this podcast to decide what I wanted to do with it, the big thing for me was, number one, understanding I don't have all the answers. I'm on this journey, and I believe my journey had a lot to do with overcoming adversity and finding ways to win in situations where I wasn't winning. And obviously, a little bit of a football career and a few all-stars there give me the title of all-star. But the reality is, all-star living is something you do every day. And just because you're living like an all-star doesn't mean you win either. So there's a lot of learning and challenges there. So I want to develop a program throughout the process of this podcast where we can talk about health, family, work, and soul, spirituality, your relationship with God, whatever you want to call it. But so what I want to do is develop my own habits and continue to develop my own habits in those 4 categories and allow people to see that others are struggling with all 4 of those categories and others need to develop them too. And if we look at our habits and find tiny little habits, that can actually improve those parts of our lives, that we can just slowly, and it's actually funny because it's slow, but it's actually very quick when you start just putting habits together. You can change your life, and you can make yourself more positive. You can make yourself anything you really want to be, instead of just letting the world turn you into whatever it seems to want you to turn into. So that's where I started, and now what I'd love to do though is ask you about you in terms of where you started your podcast. So you were 250 episodes ago. I gotta imagine that's a lot of years. Really, in terms of developing this thing. How did that start for you? What was the motivation for you?
Great question. And I think that everything in life we do is very dependent on striving to be our best self, right? And when we think about life circumstances and life context, we all go through different battles or struggles. You mentioned the word struggle a few seconds ago when you were opening up here, and we all go through our own struggles, and with struggles come opportunity. And for me, and this summer we got together and you shared your story. So for the listeners, we had come together this summer, Dan and I and a number of other people in Windsor, to share stories. And we each had 7 minutes literally to share a story. And there were many people in the audience, and we shared a story. And what I shared was my pivotal moment, if we call it a pivot point or whatever you want to call it, was a near-death experience in Cambodia. I had been living in Cambodia at the time, and I was almost killed in an accident. And when you're bleeding out. My hand went through a window and severed my ulnar artery, and I was literally bleeding out. And I was thinking of my 2 and 4 year old boys at the time, and um, it was a moment where you are thinking this is it. And long story short, I went to emergency. I was operated on. I was saved, but what that prompted in me was a real universal, I call it a sign from the universe, saying you need to do more, and you need to figure out the path you're on, and you need to figure out your purpose. And from that point forward, I started to kind of take this opportunity to really be courageous in pursuing my best self. And with that was, what message do I want to share? What message am I compelled to share with the world through my work? And I may be just one little point in the world, but if I'm striving to be my best self and to share a message with others around me, then how am I going to do that? And what message am I going to share? And that led me to podcasting, and led me to the early stages of podcasting, to be ultra clear on what it was I wanted to share, and to bring on guests, and to begin to formulate questions, and to shine the light on their stories, to reveal their greatness and the hardship and the struggle they went through in order to be their best self. So that's a long way around saying that that was my journey into podcasting, and to begin to invite inspiring people on my podcast to double click on their stories and to unpack the guiding principles that have allowed them to achieve the success that they have, and to really understand their stories to help me understand my story, to further develop an understanding of the kind of the life context that we all face, that require us to double down on our strengths and talents in order to serve the world. So that's how my podcasting journey began in the early days, and trying to figure that out.
So that's interesting. Something I picked up on there was that you were always looking for guiding principles.
Mhm.
And that's really, that gets to the core to the information that I'm looking for, and obviously Andy and I could talk all day to anybody out there that's listening, everybody, like we've been friends
Yeah.
since Jesus wore running shoes. So it's been a long time. You started back in Windsor at the University of Windsor with me, and then we separated for a long time. And in those years,
Yeah.
we obviously both went through a lot of things. So before I get into your guiding principles, because I definitely want to ask you about that. So take me back to Windsor, and then you left Windsor. If you're comfortable talking about this story,
Yeah.
you left Windsor, and what was that like for you leaving Windsor? And really, you and I both did the same thing. We both stayed away for 20, 25 years, really.
Yeah.
And we can talk about both of those things, but really, I'm more interested in you. So there you are. You're on the plane. You're taking off. Where was the first place you went? Who was with you, and how'd that work?
I was by myself. I had the courage to stand alone in that deal, but I was in Windsor. I was going to see my girlfriend at the time in Japan, wife now of more than 20 years, and I knew something compelled me that I needed to leave Windsor, and that was the hardest thing, because Windsor was my home. It was everything. And I never thought I would ever leave Windsor. I wanted to stay in Windsor. Football, I wanted to coach. I thought I wanted to become a cop or a fireman or a teacher. I didn't know. I just wanted to stay in Windsor because that was the safety. That was the only thing that I knew. So I was at Metro Airport in Detroit, and I was literally like, I'm trying to be a tough guy, going, oh yeah, I'm just getting on a plane and flying halfway across the world to Japan. But I had actually studied Japanese for 3 months prior to that, so I could kind of speak the language. And I started to cry, and I called my dad on a payphone, and I said to my dad, like, I'm scared. I'm scared. Like, this is like crazy. I can't believe I'm doing this, but I'm giving everything up to go to Japan. And I never came back to Canada. Metaphorically, like we've been back many times, but we have never lived in Canada since then. But that was scary, and it was like leaping into the unknown and really pushing myself to the edge of the capacity to leap into the unknown. I didn't know what was going to happen, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud of having the courage to leap into the unknown without knowing what was going to happen, and that's what started the journey. And from there, I have eternal gratitude for having had the courage to leap into the unknown and to experience the world. And since then, Japan, Azerbaijan, Cambodia, China, Saudi Arabia. Our boys have never lived in Canada. You've met our boys. They're 17 and 19 now. Um, but that was the start of the journey.
It's amazing. You've got two kids in tow. You married your university sweetheart. You went to Japan, obviously a worthwhile ticket because Neil is a beautiful woman and very well. She's also very patient because you're her husband. So we got that for us, right? But no, seriously, both of you very lucky. And two kids in tow. What was it like? What was it like dragging around infants to all of these places? So how long were you in Japan? How long before you had kids? With Neela. I mean, I was at your wedding. We did some dances, but tell the folks.
Yeah, that was 1999 when you were doing the dance in front of 300 people at our wedding. But we were in Japan from 97. We had our first child, Eli, in 2003. So we were there 6 years. And then we had Eli in 2003, Ty in 2005. And then we left Japan in 2007. So we were in Japan for 10 years. And then we went to Azerbaijan for 2 years, Eastern Europe. Great people, tough country. And then Cambodia, and that's where
back up. Great people, tough country. Tell me a story. Great people.
Tell you a story. Here's a story. Okay. So we moved from Japan to Azerbaijan, completely new culture. We have this great apartment. The first 2 months we were living there, I duck out to go get some groceries and come back, and I knock on the door, and my son answers the door when I get back, and he said, "Oh, somebody knocked on the door 2 minutes ago and came into the house and robbed us." So I told my son to lock the door behind me when I left to go buy groceries, and I knocked on the door when I came back, but somebody came and knocked on the door before I came back and literally walked into the apartment. My wife was cooking in the kitchen, which was on the far side of the apartment, looked at whatever they could grab, and they robbed, they took some money and jewelry and left. Wow. And this is not a knock on the Azerbaijani people because they're wonderful. So this is just like hard living people that grew up in the Eastern Soviet bloc, hard living. So I don't judge the people on this. I just, everybody has their own life story, but for whatever reason, this person felt that they needed to get money. So they robbed the apartment, they took whatever they could, and they took off, and then I showed up. And then a few months later, we had a fire in another apartment we lived in, and the firemen came in, put out the fire, and stole a case of wine and my wife's rings.
The firemen.
The firemen. So it was hard living. But when you were on the streets, like if you went out for a beer with your friends after, I don't want to paint a terrible picture, but you didn't want to walk home alone. So one time I walked home alone, and I had a beer bottle under my sleeve in case I had to smash it to like fight somebody. So that was the kind of environment we were in, but that was 20 years ago. Azerbaijan is very different now.
And what were your friends like there? So you always make tight friendships. It's one of the things that's the beautiful thing about Andy Vasily. So what were your friends like?
They were teachers. They were a combination of U.S. Marines, Green Berets, educators, people in different industries. So it was a wide range of people. Of course, they started up a football team, a flag football team. So there were people from all around the world, and that's what was beautiful. And in Japan, we had, like mostly Japanese and some foreigners, but in Azerbaijan, it was a lot of foreigners. So it was like that element of true connection, which you and I playing team sport, that's how we gravitate towards one another, is like that human connection, heart and soul. And that's what I found in Azerbaijan through these US Marines and these people I connected with. It was like, oh man, this is amazing to have this connection. What I had at Windsor with my Lancer boys,
Yeah.
now I have that in Azerbaijan. So it was gravitating towards my own strength, which was being a connector and bringing people together. And so that's what made that experience so worthwhile. But it's also taking a risk to meet people and be open to new experiences.
Well, 100%, if you, especially if you don't know the population. Although I do know that most of the people you met at the beginning were soldiers, so that's safety. That's not at all. That's great. Okay, so I want to throw a few questions at you before I get to I've really got one question to finish this thing up with, but I'm going to wait on it because it's going to take you a minute to answer, I think. So of all of your guests, so I mean, I've seen, we've got Anthony Caniel, or Calvillo rather, we've got Simon Dyson, we've got Chuck Ely, we've got James White, I mean, you've had a pile of great guests here. Who was your favorite of all of your guests? If you can have a favorite, if they're not like kids, they're not going to get hurt, but who was your favorite?
Yeah, I would have to say my favorite was Dr. Jim Lair. Dr. Jim Lair is a performance psychologist. He's coached 17 world number ones in their sport.
Wow.
Yeah, Andre Agassi, Pete Sampras, Jim Courier, tennis player back in the day. A lot of tennis players, but he's coached Olympians, Green Berets, Navy SEALs, top CEOs. And having Jim on, he's probably over 80 years old now. And he has based his whole life work around the power of personal narrative. And the stories we tell ourselves create our reality. And what I'll share with you is a quote from Jim that I have up on the wall right here. And what Jim says, his life's work distilled down into one paragraph, which is: the power broker in your life is the voice that no one hears. How well you revisit the tone and content of your private voice is what determines the quality of your life. It is the master storyteller, and the stories we tell ourselves create our reality. So Jim, really, his work, he's written several bestsellers, The Power of Story, Leading with Character. But in hearing him talk to me, his wisdom of 4 decades of deep work, it's all about what we say to ourselves. And the journey, our own journeys of excellence are rooted deeply in how we speak to ourselves, our internal critic, and how we cut ourselves down. And what we say to ourselves, imagine playing in the Grey Cup, Dan, with your experience, and having what you're thinking broadcasted on the Jumbotron for 50,000 people to see. And that's what Jim uses that metaphor. And he says, we would never want what we're thinking broadcasted on that screen because we are so harsh on ourselves. And what we say to ourselves, we would never say to our best friend who's going through hardship. We would never say to our best friend who missed a catch or threw an interception or, double faulted in Wimbledon.
Got the quarterback killed.
Right?
Yeah.
We would never say to them, oh, you suck. How could you fuck up like that? How could you fuck up like that when it mattered most? You would actually say, oh my God, I've been there, brother. I've been there. I know what it's like. You need to understand the talent that resides within. Keep the resilience going. Like you would use a different voice with other people, but yet with ourselves, we hack ourselves down. And we cut ourselves down. And Jim, being on the podcast and his work has deeply resonated with me in my journey, and that's why I wanted to share the quote. And he would be the number one guest, even though I've had so many on. But his work has deeply connected with my heart and soul and what I'm striving to do in life.
So I love that quote, and I think that is one of the most meaningful things I've heard in a long time. If I was going to turn that into if I was going to take that quote and that belief, which I think, I mean, if you really look at psychology, you understand that we are all narratives, and it is the narrative you tell yourself. It's funny you say, if you fuck up and you get the quarterback killed, what does your buddy say to you? You're laying on the ground and quarterback's dead, and
Yeah.
the team's running back a touchdown, the other way. You say, get up, right? Get up.
Get up. That's the
That's
first
enough,
step. Get up.
right?
Yeah.
I wonder, with that quote in mind, I'm always looking for tiny habits. And the reason I'm looking for tiny habits is because I believe that they it's like compound interest. They just grow, right? And
Yeah.
I'm wondering if we couldn't work out a habit out of that quote. What do you look at in terms of what would your habit be if you said on a daily basis, or maybe it's when you feel a certain way, what would you say to yourself to keep that narrative positive? Because you and I have talked enough that you actually have caught me speaking down about myself and said, no, wait a minute, man, you've been working on this for a long time.
Yeah.
This is your life's work. You've been working on this since you started playing football in university. It didn't just start 3 years ago, which is 100% correct, right? Long journeys. What would your, what would you be able to come up with a small habit there, or a thought process? Like, where would you go?
Yeah, my thought process would be this. My thought process would be rooted deeply in positive psychology, which is it's not so much it's a habit of mind rather than an actual habit. And
Yes.
the habit of mind would be to scan for the good in your life and the evidence to prove the critic wrong. So for those of us who do the hard work, you are grounding your future vision in the hard work you've done to get you to where you are and to get you to where you want to be. And I'm going to share another quote because this sums up exactly what you're asking. And it's a strategy, and it's a strategy to recognize the good within. We all have imposter syndrome. We're sitting there. I was giving a talk in front of 1,000 people one time, and I had some critics in the audience, and I let them get to me, and I kind of froze a little bit. And then I was like, I had to remind myself I deserve the right to be on the stage and share my message.
Damn right.
Yeah. And the quote I want to share with you is from Theodore Roosevelt. And what he says is, it's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done it better. The credit belongs to the person who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred with blood, sweat, and dirt, who at their best knows the triumph of high achievement, and who, at their worst, if he fails daring greatly. So when you
Andy,
remind,
I'm going to stop you because that quote. I just moved into a new office. You can see the walls are a little bare behind me, but that quote has been sitting on my wall for years. It is my favorite quote of all time
yeah,
because it is the man in the arena who matters. And you're always in the arena. Yeah, you're
yeah.
always in the arena. It doesn't matter what anybody says about you. You're in the arena, man, and you're
If
covered in
if
blood and
you
sweat.
choose to be in the arena, there's a lot of people that'll fucking watch from the cheap seats in the stands,
Yeah,
and they'll be the
criticize.
critic, and they'll say you should have done that, you should have done this. But who's in the arena? Not them,
That's
because
right.
they're not willing to leap into the unknown and courageously leap into the unknown without knowing the outcome, right? They're the ones that are afraid to leap into the unknown for a variety of reasons that we can't judge. But the person who is in the arena, you 13 years in the CFL, me trying to do the work that I'm doing, we have lots of people. We have Kieran McKenzie, who just won local election in Windsor again, who's leaping into the unknown to pursue what he is passionate about. We have lots of examples in our own lives of people who have done this, but we also know people who are in the cheap seats who won't take that leap. And what we have to do is we are genetically and evolutionarily wired to worry about what people think of us.
That's right.
And that's survival. And we have to say, you know what, I'm not going to worry about that. No saber-toothed tiger is going to jump out and eat me and kill me for taking this chance. I'm going to take this chance. I'm going to leap, and I will let my past dictate my future, which is my past is predicated on hard work, commitment, discipline, and that's the biggest thing is the difference between the cheap seats and the arena, being in the arena, and that's why I wanted to share with you. It's not a habit, but it's a habit of mine to remind yourself I've done the work to be in the arena, and I'm going to get fucking beaten up, and I'm going to be sweaty, and I'm going to be marred with dust and dirt on my face. But at the end of the day, I may be standing, I may be on my knees, I may be lying on my back, but I've done the best that I can do to pursue what matters most.
Fucking
Right?
right, brother. Absolutely. And I will throw one other thing here. I've got something for the critics. So as you know, my father passed away last October,
Yeah.
and we've inherited a number of things, but one of the favorite things I inherited, I gave to my daughter, and she gave it back to me. And I think maybe she understands that I might need it. And that's this. So I wouldn't be crude enough to tell people to fuck off. But this is for the critics.
There you go.
Because they don't understand what it's like being in the arena. You're in the arena. I've been in the arena. I'm working on getting back. So Good job, Andy. Proud of you. Glad you're here, man. I really appreciate you coming on the show. I think we covered the guide. Oh, so no, wait a minute. So I do have one more question. I almost want to leave it at where we've left it because you give me so much great stuff. But I know that you and I are going to do this again. I feel like we're going to have another shot at this one. So in terms of guiding principles that you've seen from your guests, and I love the Jim Lair. I'm incorporating that stuff right away into my thought process because I'm actually, that's fantastic. But are there any guiding principles in common that you notice between, whether it's a whether it's Anthony Calvillo or whether it's Alistair Humphrey or whether it's, is there anything that is a guiding principle that they have that you've noticed some correlation? What do you see there as correlation?
100%. It's alignment with our core values. It's regardless of what our pursuit is. We are so focused and clear on our core principles that we constantly align our thoughts, our words, our actions to those core principles, and we critically reflect on how on track we are. And when we fall off track, we accept that with non-judgment, we reflect and we get back on track. So it's this idea of knowing what your core principles are and staying aligned to those core principles and how that is manifested is in our thoughts, our words, our actions to stay aligned. And what I'll leave you with is one last quick story of Denzel Washington. And Denzel Washington gave a commencement speech about the ghosts of unfulfilled potential. So he was speaking to whatever university, a big university graduating class. And what he talked about was his own acting career and the failures that he experienced endlessly for years. And what he talks about is this idea. He was once told this story about the ghosts of unfulfilled potential. And when we're on our deathbed, are we going to be surrounded by ghosts of unfulfilled potential that say to us, we gave you gifts, we gave you strengths, we gave you talents, we gave you ideas, and you never acted on them. And now here we are surrounding you, and we're going to the grave together. And he pauses, and it's a bit morbid, but he asks the audience to think about, when you're on your deathbed, how many ghosts of unfulfilled potential will be surrounding you? And what evidence will you have to show that you fulfilled your potential? Did you leave any stone unturned? And, when I think of my own life and I think of people close to me like you and other people pursuing excellence, it's like, this is what the life journey is all about. When I'm on my deathbed, and I hope that's 30 years, 40 years from now, whenever it is, I don't want to be surrounded by those unfulfilled potential ghosts. I want to be surrounded by people knowing that I gave my best in the world and I made a difference
That's
and I made
fantastic.
an impact in my own way. And that is that theme. It goes back to the alignment of thoughts, words, actions, and core values. And the biggest journey in life is to figure out what you truly represent and what your core values are, and to live every day as closely in alignment with those core values as possible, and reflect on them and make adjustments and modifications along the way. And so that's what I want to share, dude.
It's amazing because it goes back to know yourself,
Yeah,
which means you have to have the introspection to actually look at yourself,
yeah,
which is sometimes, well, probably always where the courage has to start,
yeah,
because you see yourself warts and all, right? And you have to be
yeah.
able to look at that guy and say, well, what do I like? What do I not like? Who do I really want to be? That's amazing. That's fantastic. Andy
And
Vasily.
and hang on, and to accept that with non-judgment is the key. Non-judgment.
Yeah, I'll be working on that one, brother. Good. I'll be working on that one. The judgment comes strong with me. I was raised Catholic, so we'll see what happens. But
Yeah.
that is true, though. No, it's to me, it's that all speaks very, very loudly to me. And as do you, you're an inspiration, my friend. I really appreciate you, everything you do. People want to reach out to you. Where can they get you? I'm trying to flash these banners across the bottom here for you.
Yeah, it would be that one right there, runyourlifepodcast.com. I think if they just do a search for Andy Vasily podcast, they will find me on Buzzsprout, and that's where you can access all my work and my aligned leader blog. So that's it.
Aligned Leader blog, perfect.
Yeah.
And you'll be able to see this podcast on my Facebook, LinkedIn, and Instagram as well. And I'll make sure you get all this so you can put this out to you. So thank you so much, man. It has been an absolute pleasure as always.
Thank you. It's an honor.
All right, we'll talk to you soon.
Okay, see you, bud.
And for everybody out there, thank you very much for joining us. This is a first podcast, and I got a killer first guest, and couldn't have asked for more. So you heard it here first. Know yourself. Evaluate who you are. Align your principles, and remember, you got to look yourself in the mirror and say it's going to be okay. You don't have to judge. Talk to you soon, guys. How do I shut this off? There we go. Take care. All right, Dan Komsky, All Star Living Podcast, signing off.